Get out of my garage, now. That's what I shouted the first time I found Denise Caldwell and her HOA cronies rifling through my tools, poking around in my bomb squad training setup like a bunch of toddlers in a candy store. I'm Jack Mason, by the way, middle-class guy, bomb squad trainer, and proud owner of a family property that means more than just bricks and mortar to me. And these HOA bastards, they thought they could walk all over me. They thought wrong. Before I dive into this mess, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And stick around. By the end, you'll see exactly how I turned those HOA thugs into the neighborhood joke. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Now let me tell you why this fight was personal. This isn't just about some property dispute or parking violations. It's about legacy. My late father served in the bomb squad for 30 years. The garage I'm talking about, it's where he trained, where he taught me everything about discipline, safety, and precision. It's where I learned to respect the risks, and where I now keep the training facility alive. The tools, the equipment, they're more than just gear. They're a connection to him. And the HOA trying to tear that down, that was personal. I still remember the day Dad handed me the keys to this place. He said, "Jack, this garage is more than a workspace. It's a symbol of honor, of safety, of family. Don't ever let anyone take that away from you." So when the HOA started throwing petty fines over unauthorized storage and complaining about noise from controlled drills, but I was wrong. Denise Caldwell had her eyes set on me from the start. It began small, just little notes stuck on the door or letters mailed to my wife Emily. Remove all equipment deemed unsafe, they said. Garage clutter violates community standards. They had no idea what they were dealing with. I could have ignored them, but that wasn't an option, not when it was about protecting my family's legacy. At the next HOA meeting, Denise stood there like she owned the world, which apparently she thought she did. "Mr. Mason, your garage is an eyesore," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "You're disturbing the peace and violating multiple community codes." I kept my cool. "Denise, this garage is a training facility for bomb disposal. It's regulated and safe. If anything, it's a community asset, not a liability." Her smirk didn't fade. "We'll see about that." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about power. Denise and her clique wanted control. They wanted me out. One of the HOA board members, Greg Simmons, a guy with a chip on his shoulder and a love for enforcement, kept pushing for stronger action. He called my drills dangerous and demanded I stop them immediately. Little did they know, each drill was conducted under strict protocols, the kind my father drilled into me. Behind all the petty fights was a clear message: get out, or we'll make life miserable. But I wasn't about to fold. Emily watched it all with worry. "Jack, maybe just comply. They have the numbers, and you're fighting alone." I shook my head. "This isn't just about me, Em. It's about what Dad built. If I let them win, it's not just a garage that's lost. It's my family's honor." As weeks passed, the HOA's harassment intensified. Letters turned into threats. Denise sent inspectors without notice, barged into my property under the guise of community welfare. Each time, I stood firm, recording every interaction, documenting every trespass. They underestimated me, and that was their first mistake. One morning, I found Denise and Greg inside my garage, going through my equipment. No knock, no permission, just breaking in like they owned the place. I arrived just in time to catch them meddling with the explosive simulation devices. "Get out. Now, you don't know what you're touching," I warned, voice steady but cold. Denise laughed. "You think a little training room can scare me?" That's when I realized this wasn't just about control anymore. It was ignorance meeting arrogance, and I had the upper hand. I called the police, filed official complaints, and began to prepare. The battle lines were drawn. This story is about more than HOA bullies. It's about standing up for what's yours, about defending family, legacy, and safety. And trust me, these HOA bastards don't know what hit them next. After the police left and I secured the garage door behind me, I knew this fight was only beginning. Denise Caldwell wasn't someone who'd back down just because she got caught red-handed. No, she had bigger plans, and so did her loyal enforcer, Greg Simmons. Their eyes were set on making my life impossible, piece by piece. The very next day, I found another letter slid under my door. Not just any letter, an official-looking notice dripping with bureaucratic jargon. Immediate removal of unauthorized equipment, it read. Failure to comply will result in fines and potential legal action. They were relentless, throwing every rule and regulation they could find like daggers. I stared at the letter for a moment, then crumpled it in my hand. This wasn't about safety or regulations anymore. It was a power play, and I wasn't about to be their pawn. Emily was worried. Jack, maybe you should just comply. It's only going to get worse if you keep pushing. I looked her in the eyes, firm. This isn't about compliance. It's about protecting a legacy, a responsibility. Dad built this training ground with sweat and sacrifice. I won't just hand it over to a group of overzealous busybodies. The HOA's attacks didn't stop at paperwork. One evening, as I was leaving the house, Greg Simmons pulled me aside. Jack, you're skating on thin ice. This isn't a game. Stop the drills, or we'll escalate this. His voice was low, threatening, but his eyes showed the desperation I knew Denise was feeding. I smirked, calm. Funny thing, Greg. I didn't realize you were the community's safety expert. Maybe you should take one of my classes before making threats. That earned me a sharp glare, but I stood my ground. The next HOA meeting was a battlefield of words. Denise opened with her usual condescending tone. Mr. Mason, your property is a danger and a disturbance. The board has voted to impose daily fines until you comply. The room was filled with nods from her allies. Linda Perez, always eager to gossip, whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "He's going to destroy the neighborhood's peace." I raised my hand, voice steady. Denise, Linda, this garage isn't a danger. It's a lifeline. What you call disturbance, I call preparation. What you call destruction, I call legacy. And these fines? They're baseless. Denise's eyes flashed, but I could see the cracks forming. The community wasn't as blind as she hoped. To bolster my position, I began documenting every interaction, recording HOA meetings, and even installing discrete cameras around the property. I wasn't just fighting with words, I was gathering armor. My neighbor, Tom Hughes, who had been indifferent until now, started noticing the unfairness. Jack, they're out of line. I've seen what they're doing, and it's harassment. That was the turning point. Allies were quietly gathering. Emily encouraged me daily, reminding me, you're not alone in this. The HOA's tactics grew more creative. One morning I found a notice pinned to my door. Garage inspections will occur without prior notice. That was a blatant violation of privacy, but Denise seemed convinced she could do anything. When the inspectors showed up unannounced, I calmly asked for identification and proof of authority. They hesitated, and without it they had no right to enter. I stood firm, camera rolling. Later, Denise tried spinning the story to the neighbors, painting me as a recluse, hiding dangerous secrets. But with Tom and a few others speaking up, the narrative started to shift. The community was waking up to her overreach. At home, Emily and I devised plans. Legal consultations, community meetings, and information campaigns. I was no longer just defending a garage, I was standing for every homeowner bullied by an entitled few. But the real test was yet to come. The day Denise crossed the line and broke into my garage, thinking she could intimidate me. Looking back, that break-in wasn't just a violation of property, it was the spark that ignited the war. From that moment, I knew I couldn't just fight back. I had to outsmart them at every turn. The break-in was the point of no return. When Denise Caldwell and her crew stomped through my garage unannounced, poking around my bomb squad training equipment, they might as well have lit the fuse on a powder keg. It wasn't just about trespassing anymore. They'd crossed into dangerous territory, testing a man who knew explosives better than most, and I was ready. I sat at the kitchen table with Emily that evening, the tension between us thick as the papers spread before me. Legal guides, HOA bylaws, and stacks of notes from meetings and encounters. "This isn't a playground," I said, voice low but steely. "They're trying to push me out with brute force and ignorance, but they don't realize who they're messing with." Emily's eyes searched mine, a mix of concern and admiration. "You're more than just stubborn, Jack. You're smart, and you've got the facts on your side." I nodded. That's the only way forward. I can't just argue in meetings or threaten to call the police every time they try something. I need a plan that puts their power in check, legally and strategically. The next day I met with Sarah Mitchell, a sharp attorney specializing in property and HOA disputes. She was no-nonsense, practical, and quick to zero in on the HOA's vulnerabilities. "They're walking a fine line," Sarah said as she flipped through the documentation I'd gathered. "Unauthorized entry, lack of proper notice, harassment. These are strong grounds. We can file for a restraining order to prevent further trespass, and I suggest we also gather witness statements from neighbors." I felt a surge of hope. This was more than just paperwork. It was ammunition for the battle ahead. Over the following weeks, the HOA doubled down. Denise, sensing my preparation, tried to outmaneuver me with more aggressive tactics. Greg Simmons, who fancied himself the community's watchdog, started showing up unannounced, often accompanied by others. Their tactics weren't subtle. Intimidation through presence, false claims of hazardous materials, and blatant misrepresentations about my training exercises. One afternoon, Greg barged into the yard, waving a crumpled violation notice. "This is your last warning, Mason. The board's patience is gone." I stepped up to him, unshaken. "Greg, these drills follow strict safety protocols, regulated at state and federal levels. If you're concerned, I invite you to observe them properly. Otherwise, stop harassing my family." His smirk twisted. "We'll see who's harassing whom." Behind the scenes, I organized community meetups. My neighbor Tom Hughes, who had witnessed many of these interactions, agreed to publicly back me. "It's not just about you anymore, Jack," he told me during one gathering. "We all deserve a community that respects our rights, not one ruled by bullies." That evening, Emily and I strategized long into the night. We mapped out legal filings, media outreach, and community engagement. I even started recording the drills and daily interactions to counter any false accusations. At the next HOA meeting, the tension was palpable. Denise opened with her usual accusations, but this time, the room was different. Tom stood up, voice steady. "I've seen firsthand the harassment Jack's facing. It's unjust and disruptive to his family and to the community's trust." Several other neighbors nodded, some whispering agreements. Denise's face tightened, realizing the community's allegiance was shifting. I took my turn, voice calm but firm. "This garage is not a threat. It's a legacy. My father dedicated his life to training bomb disposal teams to keep us safe. These drills are controlled, legal, and critical. What you're doing is harassment, plain and simple." Linda Perez, usually Denise's echo chamber, tried to argue but faltered under the mounting community support. After the meeting, Denise confronted me privately. "You think a few neighbors make a difference? I have the power to shut you down." I smiled, feeling the weight of every step I'd taken. "Power isn't just about titles or votes, Denise. It's about standing for what's right. And right now, that's on my side." Meanwhile, the HOA tried to escalate through technicalities, citing obscure codes about unauthorized modifications and noise disturbances. I responded with facts, reports from experts, and legal warnings from Sarah. One symbolic moment came when I installed a security system around the garage, complete with signs warning of video surveillance. The irony wasn't lost on me. The bullies suddenly became cautious under my watchful eye. But Denise wasn't done. She launched a smear campaign on social media, twisting facts and trying to paint me as a danger to the neighborhood. It was frustrating, but I refused to be baited. Instead, I invited local reporters to my property, gave interviews explaining the real purpose of the training facility, and highlighted the HOA's overreach. Slowly the tide turned. Support grew from unexpected corners. Neighbors who'd been silent before now voiced concerns about the HOA's tactics. Some even began questioning Denise's motives and leadership. Through it all, Emily was my anchor. "You've turned this from a fight into a movement, Jack," she said one night as we reviewed footage from community meetings. I knew she was right. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person bullied by those wielding power without accountability. The legal battle ramped up. We filed official complaints, challenged fines, and prepared for courtroom confrontations. Each move was deliberate, designed to expose the HOA's missteps and protect my rights. And yet, every time they thought they had me cornered, I found a way to outmaneuver them. Through legal loopholes, community support, or simply refusing to back down. The garage, once a quiet training ground, had become the front line of a battle for justice, dignity, and fairness. The day Denise Caldwell broke into my garage, I wasn't home. She and Greg Simmons figured they could make a quick inspection, or so they thought. What they didn't realize was that my garage wasn't just any storage space. It was a bomb squad training facility meticulously set up for controlled drills and simulations. The kind of place where one wrong move could set off alarms, literally. I arrived to a scene that could only be described as chaos. Denise's face turned pale when she accidentally triggered a simulated explosive device's alert system. The loud sirens blared through the neighborhood, sending neighbors rushing to their windows, phones in hand. Greg scrambled, waving his hands frantically, trying to silence the noise. "What the hell is this?" Denise shouted, panic creeping into her usually smug tone. "Controlled environment," I said coolly, stepping into the garage. "You just stumbled into a bomb squad simulation. I suggest you back off before this escalates." Their faces registered shock, then a mix of embarrassment and fury. They'd trespassed on private property, violated my rights, and now made fools of themselves in front of half the neighborhood. Word spread fast. Within hours, texts and calls poured in from neighbors who witnessed the sirens and commotion. Some were amused, others outraged by Denise's recklessness. At the next HOA meeting, Denise tried to spin the incident as a safety hazard, accusing me of endangering the community with my so-called training. But the neighborhood was already on my side, and her accusations fell flat. Tom Hughes stood up firmly. "Denise, you barged into Jack's property without notice, set off alarms, and caused a public disturbance. Maybe it's time the board looks at its own behavior." Denise sputtered but couldn't muster a comeback. The room murmured approval. Back at home, Emily was relieved but cautious. That could have gone much worse. "I know," I admitted. "But sometimes letting them make a mistake is the best move. Now, everyone sees their true colors." The break-in became a turning point, not just legally, but socially. The community's view of the HOA shifted. Their bullying was exposed, their authority questioned. I doubled down on my preparations, installed more cameras, gathered testimonies, and worked closely with Sarah to file formal complaints against Denise and the board for illegal entry and harassment. Denise's desperation grew. She tried to intimidate me with more fines, but now they felt hollow. The neighborhood was watching, and the tide was turning. One afternoon, I hosted an open house at the garage, invited neighbors to see the facility, understand the training, and dispel myths. Watching their reactions, the pride I felt was overwhelming. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a community standing for fairness and respect. Denise watched from the sidelines, her influence waning. The very act of breaking in, intended to scare me, became her undoing. With Denise's break-in backfiring spectacularly, the HOA's grip on the neighborhood started to loosen. But I wasn't about to get complacent. If anything, I knew this was the moment to push harder. The real battle was just beginning. Sarah, my attorney, and I spent hours strategizing the next steps. "We need to make this airtight," she insisted. "File formal complaints for trespassing, harassment, and abuse of power. Document everything meticulously. This is about more than just your property. It's a stand against unlawful authority." I nodded, knowing that legal firepower was vital, but equally important was the court of public opinion, so I turned to the community. Tom Hughes became an unexpected ally, a voice of reason among the neighbors. "Jack, people are tired of being intimidated by Denise and her crew. You've got the momentum. Now, it's about turning that into lasting change." Together, we organized a neighborhood forum at the local community center. Flyers went up, emails were sent, and slowly people showed up. Some curious, others frustrated by years of HOA. I started by sharing my story, not just as a property owner, but as someone defending family legacy and basic rights. I showed videos of the break-in incident, the alarm sirens, and even clips from my bomb squad training drills. The crowd watched, captivated. One elderly neighbor raised her hand. "I always thought HOAs were there to protect us, but this is something else." A younger couple nodded. "We've had our own run-ins with the board. It's time we stand up too." The energy in the room shifted. What began as a personal fight became a collective demand for accountability. Back home, Emily and I went over legal documents, gathering affidavits from neighbors willing to testify about the HOA's bullying tactics. Each signed statement was a brick in the wall we were building against Denise's reign. But Denise wasn't silent. She doubled down on propaganda, sending emails warning neighbors of dangerous activities and disruptions. She even tried to discredit me publicly, labeling the garage a hazard. It was frustrating, but I refused to engage in mudslinging. Instead, I responded with transparency. Open invitations to the garage, community safety workshops, and regular updates via social media kept the truth visible and undeniable. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visit from Linda Perez, usually Denise's right hand. She seemed different, hesitant, almost apologetic. "Jack," she said quietly, "I've seen how this has gone. Maybe we need to rethink how things are done around here." I saw in her eyes the cracks forming in the HOA's facade. Change was stirring. The legal filings proceeded. Sarah filed complaints, pushing for injunctions to prevent further trespassing. The HOA board members, including Denise, faced increasing scrutiny, both legal and public. And through it all, my garage remained a symbol, a place of discipline, family, and resistance. Emily smiled one evening. "You're not just fighting for your property anymore, you're fighting for all of us." I nodded, the weight of responsibility settling in. This was bigger than me. It was about fairness, respect, and standing up to abuse. The next HOA meeting was a showdown. With community members attending in greater numbers and legal counsel present, Denise found herself on the defensive. Attempts to silence dissent were met with firm, reasoned responses. It was clear. The HOA's era of unchecked power was unraveling. Denise Caldwell's desperation was now palpable. After the neighborhood forum and the legal actions stacking against her, she shifted gears. No longer just issuing fines or sending inspectors, she launched a full-scale campaign to intimidate and discredit me. The HOA's new weapon? A mix of public smear tactics and covert surveillance. It started with a barrage of emails and social media posts from Denise's loyal supporters, painting me as a reckless danger who brought explosives into a peaceful neighborhood. I caught wind of whispered conversations, neighbors hesitating, unsure whether to side with me or fear the HOA's influence. One evening, as I was reviewing emails, I found an anonymous note slipped under the door. It warned me to stop stirring trouble or face consequences. Instead of fear, it fueled my resolve. Emily noticed my tension. "Jack, don't let them get inside your head." I took a deep breath. "I won't. Their fear-mongering won't work if I stay transparent and open." I ramped up my efforts to counter the HOA's narrative. I held open demonstrations explaining the safety protocols behind the bomb squad training, showing community members how the drills were controlled and far from hazardous. I invited skeptical neighbors to see for themselves. Curiosity turned into understanding. Meanwhile, I installed additional security cameras around the property, partly for evidence, partly as a deterrent. The HOA's attempts at sneaky surveillance were met with my own watchful eyes. I captured footage of board members lingering suspiciously, trying to take photos or videos without permission. One afternoon, Greg Simmons confronted me aggressively near the garage. "You think cameras will stop us? We'll find a way." I met his glare steadily. "If you're planning anything illegal, be warned, every move is recorded." The irony was thick. The bullies now under constant watch. Behind the scenes, Sarah prepared legal motions to challenge the HOA's smear campaign. "Defamation and harassment aren't just words," she said firmly. "We're going to make sure the board feels the weight of the law." As the months passed, the community's mood shifted again. Many neighbors who had once been silent began openly supporting me. Tom Hughes organized small gatherings to discuss HOA reform and accountability. The narrative was changing from dangerous neighbor to community defender. Denise's tactics became more reckless. She tried to use her position to block access to community amenities for my family and supporters. She pushed for harsher penalties, hoping to squeeze me financially. But every move was met with resistance, legal challenges, community outcry, and unwavering determination. One evening, I sat with Emily reflecting on how far we'd come. "It's exhausting," she said softly, "but you've turned this fight into something bigger, into hope." I smiled. "That's the only way to win, not by breaking people down, but by building them up." Denise's reign was slipping away, but the final battle loomed. The board had one last card to play, a formal eviction attempt based on trumped-up charges. We were ready. Denise's threat of eviction hung over us like a storm cloud, but it was one we had no intention of letting burst on our heads. I knew this wasn't just about me or my garage anymore. It was about the principle of standing up to bullies who abuse their power. So, I shifted into overdrive, turning every move Denise made into an opportunity to expose the truth. My first move was to study the eviction notice with Sarah, dissecting every line for weaknesses. The charges were flimsy at best. Fabricated claims of nuisance, unauthorized business, and property code violations. Classic HOA overreach dressed up in legal jargon. We gathered precedents and evidence to counter each accusation, but I wanted more than just a legal defense. I wanted to make the HOA's abuse visible to everyone. I began hosting informational sessions right at the garage. These were more than just open houses. They were demonstrations of what my training entailed, how strictly controlled and safe it was. Neighbors came, curious and skeptical at first, but watching the drills and hearing the safety protocols changed many minds. Children's laughter echoed in the yard as I explained how these exercises kept first responders and civilians safe. During one session, Tom Hughes caught me off guard. "Jack, this is impressive. You've turned a battle into education." I smiled, knowing that the garage had become a symbol of resistance and resilience. Meanwhile, I installed additional layers of security: smart locks, motion detectors, and cameras strategically placed to catch any more unauthorized HOA intrusions. Each time Denise or her minions attempted a surveillance run or a trespass, I was ready, collecting footage that further proved their harassment. Greg Simmons, more frustrated by the day, tried to intimidate me openly. One afternoon, he appeared near the garage with a group of neighbors, loudly accusing me of bringing danger to the community. I met his aggression with calm resolve. "Greg," I said firmly, "maybe it's time you take one of my classes. It's clear you don't understand what safety really means." His face twisted with rage, but the crowd's murmurs showed more doubt than support. The tables were turning. I also started leveraging social media, not to fight fire with fire, but to spread the truth. Videos, testimonials, live Q&A sessions, all showing the community the reality behind the HOA's attacks. Transparency became my greatest weapon. One symbolic act was placing a large Community Safety Center sign near the garage entrance. It was a quiet but bold statement. This was not a menace, but a cornerstone. Emily's support never wavered. "You've built something that can't be torn down, Jack. Not just a garage, but trust." Her words reminded me why this mattered: family, legacy, and a neighborhood's right to dignity. Denise's desperation reached new heights. She pushed for stricter fines, held secretive board meetings, and tried to rally a faction against me. But the community meetings I organized grew stronger. More neighbors spoke out, sharing stories of their own HOA struggles. Together, we were transforming the neighborhood into a place where power was checked by unity. As the eviction hearing approached, Sarah and I prepared meticulously. Every document, every witness statement, every video was compiled into a solid defense. We weren't just fighting eviction, we were fighting the abuse of power and the erosion of community trust. On the eve of the hearing, I walked through the garage, running my hands over the tools and equipment passed down from my father. This wasn't just property, it was history, safety, and honor. No HOA threat could erase that. Whatever happened in that courtroom, I knew we'd won something far greater: the respect of our neighbors and the unshakable belief that standing up for what's right can change the tide. The eviction hearing was behind us, and though the legal battle wasn't over, the outcome had already begun to ripple through the neighborhood. Denise Caldwell's tight grip on the community was loosening, her influence fractured by the growing support I'd gathered. But I knew the true victory wasn't in a courtroom alone. It was in awakening the community to stand against unchecked power. In the days after the hearing, I worked closely with Tom Hughes to organize neighborhood discussions. These weren't just about me anymore, they were about giving everyone a voice. At the local library's community room, neighbors gathered, some tentative, others eager to share their experiences. Stories of unfair fines, secretive meetings, and the relentless pressure from the HOA poured out, painting a picture of a community ready for change. "I thought it was just me," one neighbor said, voice trembling, "but hearing all of you, I realize it's been happening to many." I listened, recognizing the weight behind those words. This wasn't just about a garage or fines. It was about dignity, respect, and reclaiming control. One evening, I invited neighbors to the garage, not for drills this time, but for a community safety workshop. Emily helped set up the space, arranging chairs and refreshments. The room filled quickly, curiosity turning into camaraderie. I explained the purpose behind the training facility, emphasizing how safety and preparation benefit the entire neighborhood. The session ended with questions and conversations flowing freely. I saw neighbors nodding, smiles replacing skepticism. Even Linda Perez, once a staunch defender of Denise, attended quietly, her demeanor softened. Meanwhile, Denise's attempts to rally opposition dwindled. The more the community saw the truth, the less influence she wielded. Rumors circulated about internal disputes within the HOA board. I heard whispers of members questioning her leadership and the legality of their actions. To keep momentum, I launched a newsletter sharing updates on the legal battles, community events, and information on homeowners' rights. Transparency was key. The more informed the neighborhood became, the harder it was for fear and misinformation to take root. Tom and I worked with Sarah to prepare educational materials about homeowners' protections. These were distributed door to door, empowering residents with knowledge. One afternoon, Denise confronted me at a community event. Her confidence cracked, voice low and bitter. "You think you've won, Mason? This isn't over." I met her gaze steadily. "It's never about winning or losing, Denise. It's about fairness and respect. That's something you seem to have forgotten." She stormed off, leaving a room full of neighbors who now saw her for what she was, a figure losing touch with the community she claimed to represent. The garage became a hub for neighborly gatherings, a symbol of resistance and unity. Children played nearby as adults discussed ways to reform HOA policies, draft petitions, and hold board members accountable. Emily watched it all with quiet pride. "You didn't just save a garage, Jack. You helped save this neighborhood's soul." I smiled, knowing the fight was far from over, but reassured by the strength we'd built together. In this new chapter, the HOA's tactics of intimidation gave way to community empowerment, transparency, and shared purpose. And for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt like a true community again. The day of the courtroom showdown finally arrived, but despite all the tension, I kept my focus razor sharp. Months of preparing every document, gathering testimonies, and lining up legal support led to this moment, where I'd stand face to face with Denise Caldwell and the HOA board, people who underestimated how far I was willing to go. Sarah and I arrived early, scanning the courtroom for familiar faces. Some neighbors had come too, including Tom Hughes, who gave me a nod of encouragement. The room buzzed with quiet anticipation. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a test of right against abuse. The hearing opened with Denise and the HOA presenting their case. They repeated the usual accusations: dangerous activities, nuisance claims, and violation of community codes. But this time their tone lacked conviction. Sarah's cross-examination exposed gaps and inconsistencies in their statements. When pressed, Denise struggled to provide concrete evidence, often contradicting herself. I watched as the judge leaned forward, clearly skeptical. My heart pounded, but I kept calm, knowing the weight of truth and preparation on my side. Then came my turn. Sarah guided me through a series of questions that revealed the facts: the nature of the training facility, the strict safety protocols, and the HOA's history of harassment and unlawful entries. I shared personal stories about my father's legacy and the importance of this place not just to me but to the community's safety. The room grew quiet, the weight of my words sinking in. Neighbors' faces showed a mix of pride and relief. Even Linda Perez, once a vocal critic, sat with her arms crossed, her expression thoughtful. When I was asked to address the board's claims directly, I looked at Denise and said, "This garage is a symbol of responsibility, respect, and legacy. It's not a threat, but a shield for this community." The judge nodded, clearly moved. Sarah wrapped up by presenting video evidence, affidavits, and detailed legal arguments showing the HOA's overreach and Denise's personal involvement in the unlawful actions. Denise tried one last gambit, accusing me of intimidating board members, but her words fell flat. The truth had taken hold. After what felt like hours, the judge announced a temporary ruling. The eviction notice was invalid, and the HOA was ordered to cease all harassment pending further review. The board was also mandated to respect property rights and follow due process moving forward. As I stepped outside the courthouse, a wave of relief washed over me. Tom clasped my shoulder. "You did it, Jack. You stood up and won." But more than the victory, what mattered was the message sent to the HOA, the neighborhood, and anyone facing bullying. Abuse of power wouldn't go unchecked. That evening, Emily and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the neighborhood. "It's been a long fight," she said softly, "but you never lost your focus." I smiled, feeling the weight of every moment. "It's more than a fight. It's about justice and respect, and this is only the beginning of rebuilding trust. The garage, once a target, had become a beacon, a testament to standing firm, to resilience, and to the power of truth. The courtroom victory was a milestone, but it wasn't the end. It was the opening act of the grand finale. Denise Caldwell's grip on the neighborhood was fraying, but her stubbornness kept her fighting tooth and nail. The HOA board meeting following the ruling was set to be the real test of power. The community center was packed. More neighbors showed up than ever before, some wearing shirts with slogans like "Respect our rights," others clutching notes or petitions. The air was thick with anticipation and, frankly, a bit of defiance. Denise arrived late, flanked by a shrinking group of loyalists. Her usual confidence was replaced by a tight-lipped determination, like a queen whose castle walls were crumbling but who refused to surrender. She opened the meeting with rehearsed accusations, trying to rally support, but the room was no longer hers to command. I stood quietly as Tom Hughes addressed the crowd, laying out the facts, the community's grievances, and the legal judgments that had curtailed the HOA's abuses. His words sparked murmurs of agreement, building momentum. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, voice steady but charged. This neighborhood deserves leadership that respects its people, not control that fears them. I'm here not to divide but to unite, to ensure we build a community where everyone feels safe and valued. Denise shot daggers with her eyes, but the crowd's cheers drowned her out. The meeting became a turning point. Several board members, once Denise's staunch allies, voiced their support for reforms. Linda Perez, now visibly uneasy, proposed new rules emphasizing transparency and homeowner rights. The shift was undeniable. During the discussions, I revealed the evidence of Denise's repeated violations, unauthorized entries, harassment campaigns, and abuse of authority. The crowd gasped, some nodding grimly. Even a few of Denise's supporters lowered their heads in disbelief. Denise tried one last attempt to sway opinion, accusing me of destabilizing the community, but her words rang hollow. After hours of debate, the board voted. Denise was removed as HOA president, pending further investigation. New elections would be held, with a focus on accountability and community trust. Walking out of that meeting, the atmosphere was electric. Neighbors shook hands, exchanged stories, and spoke of hope for a better future. Back home, Emily embraced me. "You gave them their voice back." I smiled, knowing this wasn't just my victory, it was ours. The garage, once a battleground, had become a symbol of resilience and justice. Denise's downfall was proof that power wielded without respect only lasts so long. The neighborhood was healing, rebuilding trust, and moving toward a more inclusive, fair community. And me, I was ready to keep standing. Not just for my family's legacy, but for everyone who believed in standing up against oppression. Denise's removal from the HOA presidency was more than just a victory. It was a signal that change was possible. But with her departure came a wave of uncertainty. The neighborhood was in transition, and the scars from months of conflict were still raw. Emily and I spent evenings reflecting on everything that had happened. "It feels like the storm is passing," she said one night, "but the cleanup will take time." I nodded. True. We fought hard for this moment. Now it's about rebuilding what was broken: trust, community, respect. The newly elected board members, including some of Denise's former allies who had switched sides, were cautious but earnest. At the first meeting I attended as a concerned homeowner, the mood was different, less tense, more collaborative. I spoke openly about the need for transparency, clear communication, and respect for every resident's rights. The room listened, and for the first time I sensed genuine willingness to heal. One symbolic gesture stood out. The board voted unanimously to establish a community oversight committee made up of neighbors committed to fairness and accountability. Tom Hughes was elected chair, and I was invited to serve as an advisor. The garage, once a flashpoint for conflict, became a gathering place. I hosted workshops on property rights, safety protocols, and even neighborhood emergency preparedness. Neighbors who had been distant or silent stepped forward, contributing ideas and support. Linda Perez, who had once been Denise's loudest defender, approached me during one event. "Jack, I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I was blinded by loyalty. Now I see how wrong things were." Her words were a reminder that even deep divisions could be healed through openness and courage. The community's transformation wasn't without challenges. Some wounds ran deep and old resentments lingered, but the commitment to moving forward was stronger. One afternoon, as I repaired some equipment in the garage, Emily brought me a cup of coffee and smiled. "Look around, Jack. This is what you fought for." I glanced out the window. Kids played nearby. Neighbors chatted over fences, and a new sense of peace had settled. The garage was no longer a battleground. It was a beacon. Denise's reign of fear had ended, but the lessons remained clear. Standing up for what's right isn't easy, but it's necessary. Family legacy, personal dignity, and community strength were worth every fight. And as I locked up for the night, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not from victory alone, but from knowing we had reclaimed our neighborhood. Together. Months had passed since Denise Caldwell's ouster, and the neighborhood was breathing easier. The fight had transformed us all. Neighbors, once divided, now shared a common purpose. The garage that had sparked so much turmoil had become a symbol of resilience, safety, and community spirit. Emily and I stood on the porch one warm evening, watching kids run and play where tension once ruled. "Who would have thought all this started with a garage?" she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. I smiled. It was never just about the garage, it was about standing up for what's right, for family, and for every neighbor who felt powerless. The new HOA board worked with transparency and respect, holding monthly open forums and inviting feedback. Tom Hughes, now chair of the Oversight Committee, became a familiar face, bridging gaps and encouraging dialogue. The wounds were healing, but the lessons remained vivid. One afternoon, I hosted a safety demonstration at the garage, this time celebrating community rather than conflict. Neighbors gathered around as I explained bomb squad procedures, emphasizing how preparation saved lives. Children's eyes lit up with wonder, and parents nodded in appreciation. Linda Perez approached me afterwards, shaking my hand. "Jack, thank you. You changed more than policies, you changed hearts." It struck me then how far we'd come, from suspicion and fear to trust and cooperation. Of course, there were still challenges. Old fears didn't vanish overnight, and not everyone was ready to let go of the past. But the commitment to fairness, respect, and unity was stronger than ever. As I locked the garage that night, I reflected on the journey, the battles, the victories, the setbacks. It hadn't been easy, but it was worth it. This neighborhood, my family's legacy, our shared future, it was safe, respected, and thriving. And to anyone out there watching this who's trapped in their own HOA nightmare, know this: patience, knowledge, and persistence are your greatest allies. You don't have to face the bullies alone. Stand your ground, gather your community, use the power of truth and the law to protect what matters most. Because sometimes the quietest victories are the most powerful. If you're watching this and dealing with an overbearing HOA, drop your story in the comments, share where you're from, and let's build strength together. Remember, understanding the rules and having the patience to fight smart can turn the tide, sometimes when you least expect it.